All right, welcome to Growth and Innovation Unlocked. I am Scott Hurst, and I'm joined today by Brian Strong, the CEO of TenHats, a premier IT services firm and data center operator in Knoxville, Tennessee, right there in East Tennessee. TenHats offers managed IT solutions, cybersecurity, cloud, disaster recovery, and enterprise-grade data center hosting that's all built to support businesses ranging from local SMBs and also to Fortune 500 companies.
Mhm.
Brian's journey from top salesperson at Claris Networks to founding vendor registry and then leading the transformation from SH Data to TenHats not only reflects deep industry experience, but also a knack for aligning IT capabilities with real business outcomes. Brian is known for strategic rebranding, civic partnership with Covenant Health, and building a resilient infrastructure oriented toward future tech trends like AI, powered by hard infrastructure like dual 10 megawatt feeds and expandable data center, that's pretty impressive. But you got a lot of capacity there from a power standpoint. And with AI and data centers, very very thirsty for more power,
That's
you
right.
are well positioned. So with that, again, Brian Strong,
Well,
welcome.
thank
Could
you.
you then maybe share your perspective from your early days at Claris to founding Vendor Registry and ultimately returning to Knoxville to lead what is now TenHats?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to think about, but I joined the IT industry back in 2005, so this marks my 20th year in it. And um, before I was at Claris, I was in telecom, and once I made my jump over in IT, I kind of found something that was really kind of my niche. One thing I really like about IT is really complicated. There's just so many moving pieces and parts, and it's and I like from the foundation of this standpoint of technology used to be the guy with the screwdriver fixing things, and now it's just become a core piece of the daily operations of any business. I talk to businesses all the time, and I'm like, well, you're really in the technology space, you just don't know it. And they often go, well, we do this or that, and I'm like, okay, let's take away all your technology, can you operate your business? And they're like, well, no. So I'm like, you're in the technology business delivering this service or product that you're doing. And so that's kind of neat. So my experience with Claris is that was kind of unique is like there are many stages of MSPs out there. There's the what I call the micro and the small, mid-size, and then the larger MSPs. And those, it's debatable. People are out there all over the place, but anything that's above $10 million a year in annual revenue, $15 million annual revenue are considered some of the largest MSPs out there. And Claris was one of those that made it past that and got into that large environment. And a lot of it had to do with scaling and processes. Frankly, it was just sure will. In 2008, 2009, when we had the Great Recession, our company went from 65 employees to 23, and it was like 120 days. So it was like one of those, if you lost your job, you just didn't have anything. So it was one of those, we grew out of necessity and not really trying to beat anybody or trying to grow as large as we were. But then through that, we really built some processes and um, the sales process, the operational, and we went through all these different stages of having to reorganize the company to add to different growth, and we broke different things all along the way of, traditionally in MSPs, there's the all-in seat price. Well, the all-in seat price starts to really break down once you get into larger organizations, and how do you figure out co-manage, all these kind of different things. And we kind of broke through that shell through that. And once again, it was not that we were really trying to do it. We thought we had to survive. And so I always had like an entrepreneurial bend, and that's where I was in sales from at Claris. And the one thing, working in sales in the MSP space is really starting to understand who the customer was. A lot of people think it's the IT folks and who run IT, but really most of them reported up to the chief financial officer. So it was really starting to understand the economics behind technology and how it was run and how they viewed their spend and how do you justify cost and all those kind of different things. When we got into that realm, the deals got much bigger and much larger because we were talking about, offsetting costs for an employee and what's the burden rate and um, what was just the cost of management of like employees versus outsourcing and all these kind of different things. So that was a great experience. And then in 2011, I sold the biggest deal Claris ever had. It was well over $100,000 a month. I mean, it was huge for us. So big they bought me a truck.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and then severely break my leg a couple months later, um, and I'm sitting at home on a lot of pain medication, thinking very clearly. And I looked at my time at Claris and I loved it, but it was like I was ready for that next step. And it was, I wanted to be in business ownership and really in leadership. That's always been my desire since I was in high school. And so then that's where vendor registry kind of came out of as I started looking around. I love software, um, anything technology, but software you can really affect the user interaction by implementing different things and how they change their workflow. And that just really speaks to me. Um, and so vendor registry was a public procurement software that really fixed the gap between the vendors and the vendor community and the local governments. Well, local governments, there's so many of them, and all of them have their own registration process. And so we were with the first ones in the marketplace to have a centralized database to connect the vendors and the government. So the governments could actually look into a pool of all the other vendors and all the other communities that used our platform. So we kind of broke the mold in that industry. Um, and we used a lot of like machine learning and, um, you know, uh, at that time just to understand like what bids were being used and how to use them and what the verbiage to use to help get more bidders bidding on those solicitations. So we even started, back then it wasn't even called AI back then. Really, it was that the whole realm. And then 6 years later, we got bought by the number two in our industry. Um, I I kind of stepped back. I didn't, I kind of run my course on that one. Um, and then the SH Data called and we were looking for some sales and marketing help, and I was ready to get back into an industry that I kind of knew and understood, and I thought I could rest, frankly. I mean, it was kind of like putting on an old hat. Um, but when I walked into the to the company, it was like a typical MSP. They were doing about 1.5 million a year. It was very tech led, and there was, you know, documentation was bad, process was bad, value prop was bad, but they had some really good technicians. And so really it was reinventing SH Data. SH Data had a marketing, a bad marketing message. They were mixed marketing. So we wanted to reboot the name and grow 10 hat, and we came up with the name 10 Hats, and we had some help with that. And 10 Hats is one of those from, if you're a small business, we can take the people in the business are wearing multiple hats. We can take that IT hat. Or if you're a large enterprise and you have 10 facets of IT, we could take four of the hats. If they don't have they have deficiencies in certain areas, we can take four of those hats and then keep the six. And so it was one of those. And then we kind of put some of the same processes in place, and we've had really good success. We're 10 times the size we are. Well, we're 4 years down the road. Um, and so we're back in that upper echelon of MSPs. And it was kind of funny. We thought we caught lightning in a bottle once, but really it was those business processes and what we've learned in those Claris days had really helped us grow into that top tier again. So hopefully that's not too much.
That's no, this is fabulous. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I'd lined up a few questions, and you basically answered a couple of them already. And one was about the rebranding, because I think that's a very interesting rebrand. You talked about mixed messages in the market. And I think that that's very important. A company's got to be clear on what the value proposition is, right? So that
Yes,
it doesn't conflict with what they really can do, what, and then also what the market wants. But if you as a company and you as a brand are sending mixed messages, I mean, maybe you have one product line, yeah, okay, great, and but that's a message. And then you have another product line, maybe they're diametric, they opposed to it, not opposed,
correct.
but you know what I'm saying, may not necessarily be intertwined. That's okay, but you saw that. But I also thought was interesting, and I like the rebranding. I think that that's smart. I've worked at some startups as well. I worked for a large enterprise software company that was at its peak had 9, 10,000 people out of there. So,
Wow.
and then I left that company to go to a startup where I was like employee number 21. And I'd done some other startups as well. And that whole concept of wearing all those different hats, right?
Yeah,
And I took the hat of doing alliances, business development off of the president, and then I had to do a couple other things as well too. So I like that concept, I really do. I also was very impressed by what you brought up about, you had basically two trials, if you will, or challenges that you've seen that you've talked about. One was the 2008 nine meltdown, and yes, that was a tough time in around about 2000 late eight and then '09
yes,
in IT. It's almost seemed like because we had the internet age, right? The .com age, and then that kind of fell off a little bit in 2000 one or so, but it kind of picked right back up again. But then with the financial meltdown, tech was right back in the kind of in the crosshairs, right? And so that
correct.
was a tough time too. And so, but with Claris, you're able to shift, and that's the thing. Sometimes you're more scrappy or more, what's the word? Just more innovative because you have to be. And then and then also and then you start talking more with the actual people that run the business, not just the cool tech stuff, which is a lot of people think that MSPs, oh yeah, our customer is the IT people.
That's right.
No, really, your customer is the users and the
That's right.
actual business. Why are you using the tech in the first place? Not just because it's cool. You do it to run the business, right? To get results, right? To bring products to market quicker, to broadcast your message and things like that as well too. But the second one that you had, you had like you hurt your leg, or you broke your leg really badly, and
Yes,
I like how you said you were on painkillers and you had some very, some mental clarity come to mind. And, but that then drove another kind of an inflection point for you, right? A couple of inflection points that you've talked about, right?
yes.
And so very, very fascinating. And so in terms of, when did you realize that Ten Hats could then scale from, say, local managed IT support towards more enterprise grade data center services without, with robust infrastructure, enterprise clientele,
That's
from
right.
just small to then now we're not enterprise, big time. What was that? What drove that?
So, I mean, it's a, that's a great question. So when I joined SH Data, they did have the data center, just so you knew, but they were mixing the message between the data center and the MSP. And then the question is, what did we believe that we could get into the enterprise? Claris, we did enterprise. We were just known for large, the larger, the more complicated that networks, we could do them. And it was when I moved to TenHats, there was a thought behind the the staff that we can't do large, right? From that standpoint, but I believed in it. I knew that we could build a structure and we put the scale around it. And I think there's this, you have to have the belief that you can. I remember that right after I joined in September of 2020. In March of 2021, I looked at our sales guy, who's still there. I mean, he's a great guy. And I told him, I was like, hey, for the next 9 months, for the rest of the year, we're going to sell $10,000 a month in recurring revenue. And he goes, I've never seen it done before. And I was like, I have. I know it can be done. I did it. And so having the belief that you can do that and how to sell into those organizations, how to support those organizations, what they expect from that standpoint. If you've seen it, you can do it again. If you're growing from that, uh, when you don't have belief, we inched our way up the whole time. It was, let's get, this was a 50 user company. Well, can we do a 75? And then what about 100? And what about 150? And then it just kept going up from there. We actually, one of the counts we got was, we learned that we can't do thousands and thousands of people. So we hit our limit from that standpoint. But at the same time, is we knew that our market, and also from the standpoint of getting up market, our competition wasn't there. And so it gives us a whole advantage and a whole marketplace to go after, that these people need help, and we can serve them. We know how to serve them, and we put those practices back in place.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's that belief that you had because I've done it before, and then you inspire others then to have that vision or have that belief. Because nobody does anything unless they think that they have a thought first, or they think that they can do it. So if you have that belief first, that can be the foundation to then help take action and then make.
Yeah, and to finish that story that I started with, like we were going to sell $10,000 a month, I was like, we're going to do it scratching, clawing, fighting, but we're going to do it. So we missed it only by 1 month, for the rest of the 9 months, and that was in October. But we averaged well over $12,000 a month, and it was just one of those where, that kind of momentum gave us extra momentum to continue to grow, add new staff, and one of the things we look at too is, we really like A players. A players are somebody that can come in, they might make a little bit more, but they do more work. They're more proficient at it. And they expect excellence. And so it's one of those, A players bring other A players. So it was just one of those, you get that flywheel going. It takes a lot of work to get that flywheel going, but once you get it going, it's just keep pushing it and pushing it. It just becomes easier and easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you really brought out some really fantastic just principles of life and business as well too. I appreciate that. So a little bit on the kind of technology, and kind of AI as well. TenHat runs a tier 3 plus data center with powerful infrastructure. We talked about a little bit. As power needs increase inevitably, especially with AI apps, how do you plan to maybe scale that and align IT infrastructure to evolving business?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, so a lot of like, so we have some AI companies that are in the data center, and we're continuing to see them scale and grow. And they're really starting to innovate in different things. And we kind of serve two different markets. Those AI companies that are building AI models to deliver to the customers, and then the customers that are using it for the MS. And this is why it was really kind of two different businesses. We serve a lot of those, accounts in the data center that are building the models. What we do, and then the MSP is consuming those models. However, I say that, is I see in the future is that, some of these larger companies that we deal with, that they're going to have these small AI engines internally inside their four walls for their nuanced business, right? And they have different processes, and the AI model needs to really cater to, the data that they're looking for inside their own industry. And AI models don't, um it's not one AI model for everyone, right? And so it's like one of those, how does this AI learn on itself so that it can continue to help those businesses compete and thrive? And a lot of it is like we talk about with our customers from that standpoint, is understanding their data. Just because you have a lot of data doesn't mean you have good data to teach an AI model. Um, if you go back to the governments, when we were working with them, and what we found is a lot of their vendor lists were very outdated, very, very outdated. You know, 60-70% of it could be outdated, and they've had that data for a long time. Well, that's not something, if you look at that just as a specific, well, that's not a data set that you want to teach a model on. So I mean, part of it what we did was when we got those vendor list, those list of businesses, we scrubbed them. We did all these kind of different services to clean them up and reach out to find out, for these vendors to re-register, to clean the data. And it takes a lot of work to get that clean data to actually start using those data sets to learn from them. And so I think that's what we talk to a lot of our clients is, hey, you have a lot of data. You've been in business for 30 years. I mean, congratulations. So it's like one of those, do you want to refer to the data that you used 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago to teach the model? And they're like, our business has radically changed in those last 5, 10 years. No, right? So, okay, great. You've had all this old legacy data, but it's not good, right? So it's like one of those. But on the other side, you might be a medical practice. Well, we have a ton of images. Well, the humans haven't changed that much. You maybe have a lot of really good data that you could use from that standpoint of training a model. So we help customers from the standpoint of like, what's the data that they have? How do they, how have they stored it? What's the business model look like? And then helping them try to really, what we're seeing is like light bulbs go on of like, yes, I want to use AI. Yeah, AI is the future. How do I get there to help it really impact my business?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You've touched on that. You talked a little bit about healthcare, doing some research and whatnot on what some of your customers, manufacturing, I think as well too is another one as well.
Correct.
I'm sure that has diverse challenges and things that you have to different requirements in both industries. Some things are going to be horizontal, but a lot of things are going to be very very vertical, right? Very
That's right.
siloed. How do you then currently balance automation with personalization? Could maybe AI powered systems then better deliver consistent services across diverse needs? Kind of
So,
what you've outlined a little bit with the data, old data.
yeah, no, that's a good question. So, yeah, I mean, you look at IT and you always say, well, it depends, right? So, I mean, if you look at the business functions of certain different things and looking at automation, right? You have HR onboarding, right? Every company has to onboard. There's always paperwork. There's always something like that. All those kind of different things can be automated, and different business processes can be automated because every company has those kind of different things. Even some industries from the standpoint of, medical has some vertical, but there are some commonalities. And then it's like one of those, you kind of eliminate those those nuances. But the big thing is to start with the easy, the easiest ones first, um, and what we're seeing too is that people want to automate. We're seeing this in the MSP space with MSPs specifically, IT departments, um, is that they haven't gone through the process of really documenting the process and like really getting to the nuances and making sure it's done the same way every time. And so in the MSP space, what we've seen is, you have, dozens of customers, but you've catered to each customer a little differently. And so all of a sudden you have broken your standardization because one break in the process for one customer is a break in the process, right? And so how do you do that? I mean, you have to make an exception for that one. Well, then you're dealing with all these different exceptions, and it's really being disciplined on going, hey, we're doing it a certain way every time so that we can automate it. So one of the things we've done internally is actually, instead of really put in a bunch of automation tools, and we've automated some, we hired a business process person, um, about a year and a half ago, and all he's doing is documenting processes. And then when we get a process documented and we've, stamped it like this is the way it will happen, then we automate.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, and that you bring up the it takes individuals and human touch, human eyes to be able to then see some of those gaps. AI is certainly going to continue to get better and better and smarter
Oh,
and
absolutely.
However, I think as we try to learn to, and how do we work with that, right? How do we leverage our capabilities, right, as humans, that human touch and just that intuition and things like that as well too, to then also understand to identify processes that then can be enhanced, and then you can provide more personalized support, more personalized solutions for your customers, I would imagine, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, given your background, in sales, business leadership, have you then embedded some of those AI-driven customer insights or predictive service tools into your MSP model?
Yes, we have. There's several different automation tools that we definitely use. I don't, there's probably they're really specific to the MSP space. I mean, we're looking at Roost, and then we're also looking at Automate and how we script things and different things like that. And then we're continuing to, um, we, uh, we use Action One for different things. I mean, there's quite a few different tools. I mean, that's the one thing about the MSP space. You asked me about like from the Claris days, to today. We probably have 4 or 5 times as many tools today than we did back then. I mean, it could be as many as 10 times. I mean, it's just kind of hard to remember what we all had back in the 2012, 13 versus today. I mean, it seems like there's always a new tool, a new automation tool. We have several different tools for automating with Microsoft. And that's when I do see the industry starting to consolidate on these AI models and tools and something like that, and having robust packages instead of these. And it's I think it's going to be based on the industry versus everybody's got these different tool sets, because it's just you get tool fatigue basically.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds very. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But yeah, just a couple of maybe another question or two, just to bring out to also, because I think this can also be something that is important for your customers, and that is about, we talked about that very a little bit, the whole aspect of energy, right? Energy infrastructure redundancy are core strengths that you guys have, right?
Yeah,
Do you see opportunities for leveraging AI and predictive maintenance or usage, forecasting to provide better uptime, and then obviously I guess you don't necessarily burst, yeah, you need to get more power, right? Because
correct.
workloads may be kind of bursty, right? You know what I mean? That
That's
may
right.
can be bigger at times, could be much higher. That has to then help your clients then optimize their costs as well too, where you can also maximize your profits, right? So
Correct. And I mean, yeah, I mean, just power in general of like what this country is going to go through. And I know there's a bunch of initiatives from the government now, but the demand is far exceeding um, what the capacity can be. And I mean, it's just one of those like, either, and it will happen over time that they become more efficient. But also it doesn't matter, from the efficiency. Think about all, you know, I talk about this and they're like, why is the power demand going up? Right? And, from these processors and, GPUs and all this kind of different things. I always tell people, think about back in the day when you had servers that were for you, right? And you would put in a 48U, rack, you put 12. Well, then, over time, that same server was 2U. Well, then it was 1U. Well, then it's like GPUs, you can start stacking those into the same footprint that it was before. So it's not like each of these machines is consuming more power. The machines are getting smaller, right? And we can condense them all into a smaller space. And so it's just like one of those where that's with all this shrinkage. I mean, like what, um, a standard uh, data center footprint, back 10 years ago might be 8 or 10 racks. Now it's in 2. So it's like one of those, like we got to figure out, like as we continue to get better on how do we get more efficient from the standpoint of our usage of power, but then power demands are continuing to grow. And I talk about this quite a bit. And it's like, we love our, electric cars, and we continue to put more
Yeah,
on the
right.
grid, and we love our AI. The more AI, we know that AI is the future. AI requires a lot of power. It's like, and how are we going to do that? And we talked about all the mini instances of it, right? And so I don't, even the small businesses, they're going to be running many instances of AI, which their power consumption is going to skyrocket, and they have no idea that's going to happen, and they're going to
Yes.
wonder why. And so it's like, um, and so these are things. It's before managing the data center and having the data center. It's funny story is, so they recruit me to come, and they have the data center. And then they have the MSP. And the MSP was just a tag along sidecar to the data center. And so the company was, data centers are very capital intensive. And so they were like, so what we need to do is increase our revenue. We need to sell data center space. I'm like, do you want to make money faster, or do you want to grow the data center? They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, the quickest way to cash is the MSP. There's a dozens more companies out there that are looking for managed services versus um, data center space, right? But then it's like one of those. If you do the managed services right, you get data center. And so it was like one of those, in coming into that. Being in the MSP, I've been around data centers dozens and dozens of times, but managing one and actually running one, holy smokes, that the power that's required for it, and the infrastructure, and just the redundancy and resiliency. It's it is a different business model type, because it's all about infrastructure and it's not about technology. And then software is so far away from it, on the spectrum of technology. But I do think there's a power crisis that people just don't quite understand. If their lights are on at the house, they think everything is going well, but most utilities are starting to restrict um, building in their areas because of potential data centers, or the limiting the amount of data centers that come in. Because if you put a data center in here, it takes away from the economic um, you know uh, recruitment from your local chamber or whatnot to bring a manufacturing business, or another type of business, because they're consuming all the resources. So yeah, power is, that's an area I can get on my soapbox for
Oh, I
for
love it.
sure.
I love it. This is because it's a very, very important aspect that people don't realize how critical it always has been. We just take it for granted. You just turn the light switch, or we plug in our phone. I just pulled it, and I've got 5 devices in my house that are all watching something different. With the kids, maybe I'm watching something, the other kids are watching other things as well too. And then how many laptops or how many computers, how many, and you just keep plugging it in. But then now you've got the power drain that AI provides, and the capabilities. Oh yeah, that'd be a whole other podcast that maybe we ought to do this.
Yeah, and just
It's very,
just a
very
quick
fascinating.
example is like
Yeah.
something that that somebody's, what everybody's asking for, or I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people are asking for autonomous vehicles,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
You're
It's
like, well, how do autonomous vehicles impact power in relation to AI in the marketplace? Well, latency. So if you have an autonomous vehicle, it's talking to some computer, and milliseconds mean life and death in certain circumstances. So you need all these edge data centers for computing power to have those autonomous vehicles, so they can reduce the amount of latency between each of those different nodes, so that we can keep keep the citizens safe from, just sending a signal back and forth. So it's
yes,
like one of
absolutely.
those, and each one of those communities needs to build one of these data centers to have that. It consumes 10 megawatts of power. I mean, it's enough to run a whole city, right? But, from a data center standpoint, that's nothing. You're just starting.
You just
So
started.
it's,
You're
yeah.
absolutely
So, I
right.
mean, it's,
It really is truly fascinating.
it is.
Yeah, we definitely ought to have probably follow that because it fascinates me anyway. Cool. Well, good. Well, just to close out, looking ahead, how might deeper automation, whether in client onboarding, service positioning, monitoring, and then help to scale you guys?
That's a great question. IT has evolved over time. And one thing I always think about, I talk about, is just use an example, is Microsoft Exchange. Microsoft Exchange, back in um, 2008, everybody had an Exchange server on site. And then, in the early 2000 teens, right, Microsoft started Office 365 and they started using that. And so it was in the beginning, it wasn't really good. Having your own Exchange server was really the way to go. But what happened over time, they got better and better and better. And there's this tipping point when, the tipping point when it made no sense to host your own Exchange. You would just do Office 365. So I think there's a bunch of different things that we're talking about. Like we had Exchange experts, right? Well, today they, having an Exchange expert, you're a dinosaur, right? And so I think there's a whole evolution of like this automation and AI of the things that like provisioning laptops. It's going to be an executable on your machine, and then all of your applications will just dump down to it. And then, it's going to that more zero trust kind of environment where all those applications, you fire up your laptop, and that executable will create all the tunnels that you need. You'll be on your corporate network no matter where you are. So think about all those different automations that are going on for that, and then all the time that people are using implementing laptops, all that goes away. All that time is recaptured to do something else. So I mean, I think as we continue to grow, we're looking at automation as that we can stop doing the things of the past and start doing things new, and we can do more of it because automation really helps. And I think, what we'll see in the next really 5 years is a really another major shift in how IT is delivered. And I think, in my personal opinion, it's the way people have always thought it should be delivered. It's like when you get a new iPhone and you just scan it and it downloads all your apps. It migrates all your contacts. It does all that kind of different things. Your computers are going to be the same way. Your corporate network's going to be the same way. It's just going to be, just the device that you use and then you throw away and you get another one.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Make it easy. Make it easy because the power of technology is not the device, right?
it
The
is
power
not
of technology is the data. It really
correct.
is, and then the information that's contained therein, and the ability to be able to use that data, obviously, as well. Well, this is, Brian, this has been very, very enlightening. It really has. This is, yeah, I didn't think we'd necessarily go down the path that we did, but wow, you've shown how a combination of, having deep technical infrastructure, and then you talked about that kind of brand evolution, how that was very, very important. And then also we dove in a little bit about relationship first leadership empowers growth and innovation, even in, the face of AI continuing to automate, align powerful infrastructure with future forward business needs like, AI workloads and how that's going to continue to evolve. You talk about in 5 years, things are going to be just much more different, and it's going to be, I think you're probably right. It's just going to work.
Yeah.
When you get a new device, that does no, that's not going to really matter. You also talked about build IT solutions that speak business language and close communication gaps, and then have that kind of client first mentality when you talked about who really is your end customer. I think that was very important as well. So thank you very much for your time. And with that, listeners, reflect on your own tech stack. Is it future ready? Are your IT services aligned with business goals, and could automation strengthen your operations while also preserving personalization as well too, while diving into AI? So, Brian, with that, where can then listeners learn more about TenHats and how to connect?
Yeah. So, tenhats.com is our website. Also, you can follow me on LinkedIn. It's Brian Strong. Um, and you can find me at the Ten Hats, and we can connect and we can, learn more about our services or just have a good conversation.
Great. Well, thank you very much again, Brian. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and share it. I'm Scott Hurst, and this has been Growth and Innovation Unlocked. Until next time.